All right, these are just some random thoughts about why I really like inline styles. I'm not saying everyone should use inline styles. I'm not saying inline styles has solved everything because it hasn't solved everything. But I really enjoy using inline styles. And this is why. Number one, naming things is really hard. And so if I can postpone naming things or never name things, I would love to do that. With CSS, if you're using like class names, you immediately have to name a thing, right? Like this column here is my whole app, and I'd have to name it something like the outer wrapper or like the shell or something, and it just like, and then I'm going to have another outer wrapper somewhere else, and I'm going to have an inner wrapper and then an inner outer wrapper, and it kind of gets hard where like just the position of this column at the top level of my app, like it tells me what it is, and I don't really have to name it. Now, naming things, of course, is very important, but what happens to me with CSS is that now I've got this thing right here, so this title. And instead of being able to just style this thing like this, I would have to name it something like the title or something immediately. And then once I have all of these names, they aren't like, you just have to name so many things, or I do, that I have to name so many things that I just name them really bad. And you don't ever take the time to go back and fix all of those names. I mean, it is so, like, you could bike shed for days on all of this class names that you have to give specific elements on a page. And so that's number one. Maybe that's a really bad reason why, but it's one thing that I like is I don't necessarily have to name things. I can see that there's an element here, and I can see that it's got the city in it, and that's kind of all that I need. But if I do need to name it, I can just cut this and paste it up here and call it the title. Right, and now I've named it just as if I had a class name. So when I'm ready to name something, then I can. And I only do that when it's starting to get confusing. And then I take some time and I think, okay, what should I name this? Versus a class name approach, I'm forced to name it immediately. And for me, that leads to a lot of bad names that I end up just kind of being stuck with for a long time. Number two, like we just saw, refactoring is just copy and paste. If I was using a class name here on this bit of code, and I wanted to make a different file, right? So I take this stuff, and I want to make a new thing like the title.js. With inline styles, I'm done right here. Export default title. Right, that's it. I'm done. The styles came with it. I copy and pasted, and that was it. If I was using like CSS modules or something, I would have to be like, okay, what's the class name on here? And then I'd come up here and find, okay, I'm importing from this class name, and then that would send me over to this CSS file over here, and then I've got to come and find the class name, and then I'm like, okay, I got that class name, and I come over here and import it into there, and then I got to make another new file, if I could, right, and then I got to do like my title.css file, or I don't know, we'll call it whatever, and then I got to paste in this CSS that I grabbed over into this other file. So now refactoring out this little thing turns into kind of a big ordeal. You got to get the markup, cut that out, paste it into a new file. You've got to get all the imports that came into it for the styles and take those out of the file from the top, which is in a totally different place in the file, and get those imports into the new file. And then you've got to go over to your style sheet and find all of the imports from there, and then make a new style sheet and stick them all, and you get it. So it makes refactoring a little bit harder. Not harder, but just takes longer. Um, and so anything that makes refactoring more than cut and paste for me, I tend to postpone for a really long time. Where with inline styles, when I'm refactoring and I recognize, I've got a good name for this now, or this stuff is in my way, I want to abstract it into something a little bit more reusable. The refactoring effort is usually just make one new file, cut, paste, and then move some things from literal values into like props, and that's it. Where when I'm using CSS modules or normal style sheets, there's a lot more involved when I identify an abstraction that I want to make. And so I tend not to make those abstractions because they're high effort, where this is really low effort. And then the last thing is the mental CSS selecting. So when you've got class names, like say I wanted to change the font size here to 50 pixels, and then I wanted to change the padding down here to 10. If I was using a style sheet, I'd have to look at this class name, then I'd come over to a different file, and I'd have to find that class name and change it, and then I'd come back over to this file and say, okay, what's the class name on this one? I come back over to this file, and then I find that class name, and sometimes they're right next to each other, and it would be really easy to just change the font size and then change the padding. But usually after a while, like this thing is 400 lines down here, and so it's not difficult work, but it's a whole lot more work than when it's just right here in line. And so when I'm editing my styles in an app where my styles are in line, there's a whole step that I don't have to do. I don't have to do the mental CSS selecting and finding stuff in other files. It's all just right there. My one concern is that this is a initial development productivity boost, and that it's actually a hindrance later. I've been doing this for about 6 months with JSX style on another app, and coming back to it, I've enjoyed it. I haven't had a hard time with it because these same things apply. I don't have to be bouncing around between a whole lot of files. I don't have to be mentally CSS selecting things. I can just find the element that I want to change the styles on and go change it. And if it's abstracted into another component, well, then it's the very same as editing any other component. Anyway, that's why I like it. Again, I'm not saying that what you do is wrong. What you do is probably great. That sounds totally sarcastic. Maybe I should edit off this last few minutes. Anyway, thanks for watching my Tuesday morning ramblings. I had to change a diaper today, babysitting my nephew. I'm definitely done having kids.